Okay, we are live. Today is Sunday, September the 21st, 2014. Welcome, guys, and welcome to everybody that's watching. Uh, First order of business, Pete, your book, The Weird Company, is coming out on Tuesday, right? Available on Tuesday?
That's what Amazon says.
Can you move your head a little bit to the side, Pete?
Here's my.
Maybe hold one up.
Yep, I got copies on Friday.
Nice.
So,
Very
The
nice.
Secret History of H.P. Lovecraft's 20th Century.
There you go. Hey, Olivia.
Hey.
Hi, Olivia.
Hey.
Yeah.
Hey.
very excited. It's out a couple of weeks ahead of schedule. At least that's what they say.
Mm-hmm.
We're very happy. Now we're scrambling to do, stuff.
Available on Tuesday at audible.com as well.
I haven't seen the Audible link go up, but
Mhm.
I know that Oliver finished reading the book several weeks ago. So be soon.
Is Reanimatrix going to be the next one after that?
And yes, Reanimatrix will tell the story of. It's going to be the sequel. It's going to take a step back. Reanimators covered 25 years. Weird Company is set with a few flashbacks. Is set literally in a couple days, and Reanimatrix is going to cover the year with a few flashbacks before the Dunwich Horror. And it's going to
I thought Reanimatrix was going to be the Livia Llewellyn biography you were talking about.
It is an adult novel. There are some.
That's what I'm talking about, adult novels.
Situations.
Yeah, there's a swear word too in there, yeah.
The F word all over the place.
Tears.
Yeah.
Reanimatrix, as I write it and plot it, deals with Detective Robert Peasley, the forgotten son of Wingate Peasley, the one that no one talks about. He's a cop in Arkham, and he catches a dead body that's pulled out of the Miskatonic, and he learns very quickly that he knows who it is. It's Megan Halsey, Alan Halsey's daughter, and he spends the next year investigating her life and why she ended up dead and why her body is missing from the morgue. And in the process, he falls in love with her.
So this is like Twin Peaks or something.
Let me deal with this one, Rick. Twin Peaks is an homage to a book and a movie called Laura. Laura was written in the 40s, and the movie was done in the 50s. Vincent Price has a very small part of it. It is about a detective who picks up a case where this girl has had her face blown off by a shotgun. She's a model and an entrepreneur. And through the course of investigating her life, he falls in love with her.
That does sound familiar.
And Twin Peaks is an homage to that movie and book.
And so was an episode of Magnum P.I. and Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
Yep.
Okay, so I've got a Twin Peaks story. I took Danielle out for her birthday last Saturday to buy some clothes because she needs some clothes desperately, I was told. So we're out shopping, having a fun day, and then we're going to get some lunch, and there's this restaurant nearby. I'm a big fan of the show, too, by the way, Twin Peaks. So there's this restaurant called Twin Peaks, and we're both like, oh, yeah, I'm like, yeah, I love that show. Let's go check it out. Let's go have lunch there. Well, I just once again found out how naive I was because I walked in the door.
It's a strip club.
Twin Peaks.
And it's basically a Hooters clone.
What?
Yeah, that's what the natural illusion of Twin Peaks is.
Well, I thought of the show right away, and they've even got all this, it looks like a restaurant from Twin Peaks. I mean, it's deliberate. You know.
Harry Cobbler?
So we walk in and we both go like this. We're going to the Mexican restaurant next door, actually. So that's what
It's all a scam to suck in these Twin Peaks television.
Yeah, exactly.
You expect to see.
I mean, let's face it, Lynch does like young women, but...
So, okay, so I also want to quickly mention that my friend William Holloway, who's going to start joining us on these shows soon, he's got a new book out too, Lovecraftian novel called Lucky's Girl. You can just, actually you can go to the Lovecraft Easing website and it's on the left side banner. If you click the banner, it'll take you right to the Amazon page, and you'll also be supporting the magazine if you buy it that way. But it's a good little novel, so check it out. That just came out last week, I believe. So, anyway, yeah, The Weird Company on Tuesday. So.
Weird Company on Tuesday, and I'm surprised it's still sitting very high on some weird Amazon list. So.
What was that, Matt? You got to buy another book?
No, I can't. I don't think you can hear me. Can you?
We can hear you now.
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah.
My thing was, I had a similar incident with my wife, like you did. It's like we were out shopping, and I said, "Well, let's go to this nice Irish pub over here." So we go in and sit down. It turns out it's the Tilted Kilt. It's like, okay.
God.
Mine wasn't that bad. I had a bad bar experience. We've all had bad bar experiences. But we went to an Irish pub on St. Paddy's Day. Our waitress was Cuban, only spoke Spanish. They had no Guinness, no bangers and mash, no cabbage and corned beef. It was all sold out. And it was Friday of St. Paddy's Day weekend. And we're like, you're going to go under this weekend if you don't have any of this stuff. And she didn't understand a word we said. My wife had to order for the entire table.
Well, you know, sometimes I feel like no matter what you do with this Lovecraft racism thing, people are going to be pissed off. If you don't discuss it, you know, especially when you have a large following, people are going to be Lovecraftian following. People are going to be pissed because they think you should have discussed it. If you do discuss it, people get pissed. Other people get pissed because they're like, you know, why do we have to bring this up all the time? Well, the truth is, we've really not talked about it very much at all, and it's a frequent topic lately. You know, I think balance is the key, as with almost everything. I have an African American friend who can't be here today. I've asked him on the show a couple times, but he just can't make it on Sundays. And as a matter of, his name's Wesley. As a matter of fact, he sometimes comes on he's one of the players on our Call of Cthulhu games. So he wrote this. He said I could read it. Lovecraft is a racist because I think it goes beyond obvious that what an African American person has to say about this topic is important. So here's what Wesley has to say. Lovecraft is a racist, and we must reconcile ourselves to that fact. To be honest, I cannot provide a sound argument for continuing to enjoy Lovecraft while knowing and not caring that he would not be pleased by my company. I can point out that orchids may bloom from the rotted corpse, and our visit to the moon was fueled by some of the darkest passages in history. How you feel about that is your own affair. How you make peace with that is your own affair, but I, for one, give it no further thought. So, pretty...
Can I just, going back, a lot of this came up because certain persons were upset about the bust designed for the World Fantasy Award. And I just want to kind of go back into history, which we talked about before, about how this came about. The original convention where they gave out this award was in Providence, Rhode Island, Lovecraft's hometown. at least 3 of the people on the panel who designed the award were Fritz Lieber, Ramsey Campbell, and Gahan Wilson. And so it is only natural at that point that they chose Lovecraft as the bust. And it's only natural they chose Gahan Wilson's cartoon, caricature as it were, as the basis for the sculpture. I do not think that any of the participants ever envisioned this would still be the same way 40 years from now.
Yeah.
Because this was more than 40 years ago, I think, that this happened. I understand that one of the highlights of the convention, however, was Fritz Lieber read The Haunter of the Dark, which I would have paid dear money to hear. Now, Gahan Wilson is mostly retired, Fritz Lieber is gone, and Ramsey Campbell doesn't ever really want to make anybody angry. You know, he's a gentleman. You know, but I honestly don't think any of them would have cared if you switched the bust. And I also think, like, what's the big deal anyway? Isn't it up to the panel or the committee or the membership of the World Fantasy Organization
Yeah,
make
absolutely.
that?
Well,
It's like,
on that note, let me just read off the convention organizers.
Yeah, go ahead.
Kirby McCauley, who just passed away, Don Grant, T.E.D. Klein, Dave Hartwell, Don Grant, John Stanley, Bill Desmond, Bob Booth, Lupe, and Charles Collins. Those were the ones that Gahan Wilson mentions as the controlling forces in his essay. Also in his essay, he mentions that they were at a loss as to what to actually design for the statue, and that he suggested that they follow the Mr. Raiders of America and the famous bust of Poe with a bust of Lovecraft. So, and then he suggested, after that was accepted, that he sculpt it.
Well, I, for one, you know, I run a magazine called the Lovecraft E-Zine, and I got to say, I could care less if they changed the World Fantasy Award from Lovecraft to something else. You know, Lovecraft wrote some fantasy, but does anyone really consider Lovecraft to be a fantasy writer? I mean, I think more of sci-fi and science fiction and horror when I think of Lovecraft.
Yeah, he wrote his Dunsanian phase.
Yeah.
Dreamland stuff.
Yeah, but still, he's not fantasy doesn't really define him.
No.
You know?
You know, so there's that whole issue about the bust, which is like, but if they're going to change it, then I'm of the opinion, for what that's worth, that they need to change it away from a person, because they're going to have a really hard time picking anyone who would say is as influential today as Lovecraft's writing seems to be across a lot of genres. So if they want to change it to something like a dragon or a chimera, as suggested by Nick Mamatas, okay, you know, getting back to the separate issue of getting in a lather about Lovecraft's racism, it's very hard to get over a certain level of people being dug in about how they feel about this. Some people think that means you need to completely reject his work. Well, that's ridiculous. It's like, you know, a lot of people carry a grudge against S.T. Joshi because they don't like his arrogance, which comes across in his blogs. But on the other hand, they don't address the substantive points that he makes about no one has ever tried to conceal the fact that Lovecraft is a racist. You know, all you have to do is pick up the horror at Red Hook and it stares you in the face.
Yeah.
But is that all we say? Because, you know, you think about it, how many of you at your wedding did they play Here Comes the Bride? Well, that's the wedding march from Lohengrin by Richard Wagner, who was a vicious anti-Semite, you know, and yet we played it at my wedding. You know, how many of you have enjoyed The Mikado? You know, they have Gilbert and Sullivan festivals all over the place. Well, you know that song, It's Someday It Should Happen, and then they go on to sing I Have a Little List?
Mm-hmm.
In the original libretto, from Gilbert and Sullivan's, I had a little list, and I'm sorry, I don't like to use offensive language. It says, on the list was the nigger serenader and the others of his race. So what do? Do they address that in any of the program notes of any Gilbert and Sullivan festival you've ever been to? No. What they do is they change the lyric. And then they don't mention it again. But that was the tenor of the times. You know, I wonder, 100 years from now, what are they, no one will be talking about me, but, you know, about our times, what are they going to say about the people of our times? That we were so homophobic and misogynistic, that we were so materialistic that we let the world burn, you know, and they're going to say, you know, how could you not see, you know, that you are so wrong in this circumstance? Nobody can stand up to that kind of scrutiny.
Which is exactly what ST said. I mean, yeah, I do think he comes across as pretty arrogant. At the same time, he did make some pretty valid points. I'm looking at his blog right now. Let me express myself in words of one syllable that even Mr. Older can understand. No one from the past can stand up to such scrutiny. Look, I don't agree with all the emotion, but he's right. Very few people from the past can stand up to that kind of scrutiny. And I want to be perfectly clear. You can't excuse Lovecraft's racism at all. At the same time, you know, is there any more hypocritical words ever written than "we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal"?
Yes.
You know what I mean? I mean, the guy that wrote these words owned slaves till the day he died.
And
you know, but we don't throw away the Declaration of Independence. Sorry.
And he did more than own them.
Yeah, he did a lot more than own them.
Yep.
You know, so it's a balance.
Actually, you know, I got to say, there's a little comedy clip. I'm going to put it on the Lovecraft Easing website. It has nothing to do with this, but it's about Thomas Jefferson comes back from the past to see what the nation he helped create has become. And how we're not agrarian farmers who are peaceful, we're very aggressive. And it just deals with the whole issue of him owning slaves, and I got a big belly laugh out of it. Anyway, I'll just link it to the website easily.
I think there was a Vault of Doom comic that came out this week that's very relevant. But I'll find it and link it later.
I think someone linked to it on the Lovecraft Easing page earlier today. Yeah. You know, I think this is worth talking about. At the same time, I'm far more concerned with how we're treating people today than I am with how somebody 75 or 80 years ago, what their views were. It is worth talking about, but it's far more important how we're treating minorities, women, each other today. That's far more important, you know. So
I think to me it's only an issue if it gets glossed over. You know, if you openly admit, you know, this writer was Shakespeare was anti-Semitic in Merchant of Venice. You admit it. And by today's standards, we would not condone that.
Well, since we're on that track, Rick and Mike, let me just step in here. If we're going to do this, if we're going to go down this path, there are some awards that I would like to go first. John W. Campbell Award.
But it's not if we're going.
No. Let me finish. John W. Campbell Award. John W. Campbell was an acknowledged racist. He spoke publicly about how he believed that African Americans were against emancipation and that some people were just born to be slaves. So let's get rid of the Campbell Award. Edgar Allan Poe married his 13-year-old cousin. Let's go.
He was also racist too.
Yeah. Agatha Christie. What was the title of Then There Were None? Oh yeah,
Not 10 Little Indians.
10 Little Niggers.
Yeah.
Bulwer Lytton. Yeah, it's a joke award, but he had his ex-wife committed to an insane asylum for opposing his political views. Okay? The Booker Prize, that was funded from money made by an organization, a company that kept slaves and exploited Caribbean people on sugar farms. And in 1972, the winner of the Booker Prize, John Berger, donated half his money in protest to the British Black Panthers. Hugo Gernsback, for the Hugo Award, just conveniently forgot to pay his writers.
Nice.
So, let me get this straight. This is an award for writing? Honoring a man who didn't pay his writers? All right. Now, here's the one that's a little esoteric. The Newbery Prize is named for John Newbery, was a publisher of children's literature. In his books, he would often include ads, and he would actually have the novels rewritten and put product placement into the novels. And he made a lot of money off of something called Dr. Robert James Fever Powder, which was a fake medicine. It was actually antimony and phosphate of lime, and it's directly linked to the death of one of his authors. So, and that's the Children's Award. So, if we're going to go down this path, let's do it.
Yeah,
Let's
all the
go
way.
after all of them. And I don't think that Lovecraft, the World Fantasy Award, which is just a bust, should be first in line. There are worse things waiting or out there. And, and Rick brought up and Mike brought up a good point. We don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. The Constitution was written mostly by men who had really sexist and racist views. But we take what we want from that, what we need. Henry Ford was a Nazi, or at least a fascist. We don't throw everything out. The point I think I'm going to make here is this: we've made a mistake, and we've taken these people and we've put them on a pedestal and thought of them as gods, and they have feet of clay, and they're not gods, they're people. And if we name any of these awards after a person, we are eventually going to find a way to dig something up on them and say, "Oh, look, you didn't let dogs vote."
Yeah.
And we're going to hold them accountable. Now, the only person I can't find anything was Andrew Carnegie. Apparently, he was just great.
No, come on. How do you think he made all his money?
Yeah,
He was a robber baron.
Right, and Joseph Noble. Is it Joseph? Anyway, yeah, he felt guilty. That's why he created the Nobel Prize.
Alfred
Noble, thank you. I'm confusing it with someone else. But
Joseph Mengele you were talking about.
That's a very good point, Pete. If we're going to go down this road, then there's a lot of other candidates to go after as well. I'm looking at the wording for the original petition. Danielle Jose Older, am I saying his name right? Just read a little bit of it. While H.P. Lovecraft, whose head the current award is modeled after, did leave a lasting mark on speculative fiction, he was also an avowed racist and a terrible wordsmith. Okay, I don't really think anyone that's done half a minute's research into this can argue with the fact that Lovecraft was a racist. He was. But the terrible wordsmith is the thing that I have a problem with, because that's not a fact, that's an opinion. There are many people that disagree with that.
If that has any truth, it was his early works. Like when Lynn Carter did his book on Lovecraft, he was saying like the nameless city used too many adjectives, whatever. But he got rid of a lot of that certainly by Shadow Out of Time.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, much earlier.
Well, I guess my point is, if they want to change the award because of Lovecraft's racism, as Pete said, there's a lot of other candidates to go after too. But okay, whatever. That's a valid reason. One could say, but it seems that he's also trying to use this as a basis for, Lovecraft sucks anyway. Instead of focusing on the racism thing.
But if
maybe
we go,
maybe the way Lovecraft wrote is not everyone's cup of tea, but it certainly is a lot of people's cup of tea.
okay,
Matt,
that's
Joe.
it is. But if we go back to the beginning of this, here's a woman who won the award and was giddy, very excited winning the award. Now, as somebody who just won an award, I understand that kind of excitement.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, okay, cool. So a friend of hers comes over and sees the award and mentions Lovecraft's racism to this woman,
Okay.
which she doesn't know anything at all about. She's won the award, she's ecstatic, but she doesn't know a damn thing about Lovecraft's racism. Apparently this friend goes to the internet, shows her the poem. She's just horrified. Okay, I understand that. That's perfectly valid. This woman didn't say blow up the world. She was extremely excited to win this award and then found out, completely by accident, that the award is a bust of this hardcore racist. You know, other people took up the sword here, not this woman. This woman is like absolutely innocent. Yeah, she wrote a blog post about it. You know, there's nothing horrible in that blog post.
Mm-hmm.
If I was a person of color, I could understand being that offended. That's absolutely rational. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, it's someone else who decided to do something else with what happened to this woman.
Right.
You know, um, is he an avowed racist? Yeah, he was. There's no ifs, ands, or buts.
Right.
Did he soften at the end? Okay, apparently he did a little bit, but he's still a racist. So that's not an issue. Does this award offend some people? Yes, it does. Okay, I'm not a member of whoever the World Fantasy Society, whatever it is. I'm sure not on the committee. If they've heard this going on in the universe, and apparently they have, it's hard not to, and they're going to take a look at it. That's up to them. I'm not a member of their society. I'm certainly, like I said, not on the committee. If that committee decides to, sit down in a room somewhere and say, okay, to some people this is very offensive, we should think about changing it, that's fine. That's up to them. That's not up to Older. That's not up to me. That's up to them.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
And I absolutely agree that if the award is changed, Nick Mamontas's idea of making it a chimera is as good an idea as I heard. Make it a chimera. Make it Medusa, a classical monster, a unicorn. I don't know. Do not make it another person. I mean, we don't know where we'll be in 100 years. There's all kinds of science being developed. What if in 100 years we're all looked at as barbarians because a lot of us eat meat?
Yeah.
What if humankind in 100 years decides that animals have thought, have sensation, they feel pain, blah, 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 and that it was absolute barbarism for us to not see that and stop eating meat.
Joe, here's what I don't understand. I understand discussing this because I think it is worthy of discussion. What I don't understand is I see so much emotion and
Okay, well that's
You know,
where I
hey,
was
I see
going.
so much emotion in ST's posts. I see it on Facebook on the other side. What's everyone so pissed off about? Why can't we just discuss it like adults?
Well, that's it. It's like ST is absolutely right that no one can bear this scrutiny. You know, I sure couldn't. It says sinner somewhere on one of these things on my desk in all capital letters. Um, but this vitriol.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are posts on Facebook that, and not just one, that run into 175 comments, 200 comments, and they descend into, he's just a fucking asshole.
Yeah, exactly.
That's, I'm sorry, that's beyond wrong. You know, there's a pro Lovecraft camp, apparently an anti Lovecraft camp. Um, it looks like watching our Congress.
Yeah.
It really does.
I think again the mistake is that people are either oh Lovecraft or they're just Lovecraft.
Yeah, they forget there's a truth in the middle there.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
You know, Lovecraft is not the only writer. Yes, he's a very influential writer and has been for a long period of time. And yes, he's turned into a, I'm not even sure if it's cottage industry anymore.
Yeah, it's $1 billion.
He sells so well now that he's long since passed the cottage industry stage. But you know, if fantasy is part of this, weird fiction,
Mm-hmm.
and to me it is. Here's 1,100 pages in a absolutely benchmark. This book is as important as Dangerous Visions was. It's as important as Macaulay's Dark Forces was. There's one Lovecraft story in here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, Lovecraft's important. Yeah, he's influential. There are a lot of other important, influential writers. Lovecraft is not the only element in weird fiction.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The only reason why my magazine it's called the Lovecraft Easing because it didn't make sense to call it the weird fiction, cosmic horror, man's inconsequential place in the universe easing. Lovecraft Easing just kind of.
Well, that sounds pretty pithy. You know, that you could go with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
There are some people who are just too attached to Lovecraft, perhaps. They have him on such a pedestal that other people are not allowed to say anything one way or another. That is not, if you're either pro-Lovecraft or you're nobody.
And I don't get this at all. I don't get it at all. I really like Lovecraft. I like mythos fiction and weird fiction. I like a good yarn, Yeah. It's like, it doesn't bug me if someone doesn't like HPL as much as I do, and HPL isn't the only thing that I read.
Right.
I don't, but maybe that's part and parcel of being a fan these days on the internet, is that you have to be a rabid partisan.
Yeah, but, okay, I don't think so, because on Facebook I interact with fans. And a great many of them seem nice. Sometimes they get a little excited, but what we're seeing in some of these threads, that's what they're called, right? This resembles the sociopathic behavior of trolls. It's like, all right. We've been on here. Matt said A. Pulver said B. We disagree. I don't sit here and go, "Fuck you, Matt. You're a shithead asshole." It's like, no, I don't agree. Oh, well, that's what I send you an
No,
email.
it's more subtext. Yeah, but go on.
Yeah. Well, it's like it's okay to disagree.
Yeah. Yeah.
Matt's Matt, I'm me. You know, we're all individuals. One of the reasons we read is to examine individuals who are not ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
personally, I love getting into a discussion with someone who does not hold the same views as I do or who disagrees with me, because honestly, I might learn something. But one of the things I hate more than anything is when we disagree and we just can't do it amicably. Let's talk about, okay, what's your thoughts on this? What's your thoughts on this? It just seems it doesn't happen much anymore. I don't understand it.
We had a controversy a couple months ago, and I posted a very long discussion about, my opinion. Do I agree with Mike? No, not all the time. But, we have a civil discourse. And that has been the complaint about the internet for a long time now, is that it has eliminated civil discourse. Because you can say whatever you want, and there's no retribution.
Right, and the thing is too is there's not even proximity. In the past, you and I could sit in a room. You might be hesitant to say something because this was an actual face-to-face. And at least in theory, there was some modicum of decorum that society had imprinted us with. So face-to-face, we might be a little more ambassadorial. With the internet, you can do whatever you want. Some of these people are so invisible, it's pathetic.
Yeah. I was several decades ago. I was at a convention at a banquet dinner, and the author guest of honor made a casual comment that the Holocaust never happened.
Yeah.
Half the banquet got up and left.
Cool.
I mean, that's...
Yeah, there was a consequence to what he said.
Consequence.
Someone want to explain to me exactly what people are talking about when they use the phrase white guilt? Hey, what the heck does that mean? Bill.
I've never heard the term, but I could guess. Whoa!
Hey, this is Bill Holloway, guys. He's the guy I was talking about, a Lucky's Girl author.
Well, put Bill on the spot. Bill, what does white guilt mean to you?
Is your microphone working?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Say something profound. Yeah, we can hear you.
What are you talking about? I'm sorry, I just got here, was having some technical
We are talking about
Lovecraft.
we are talking about angels and puppy dogs and candy. Livia.
And racism. Oh, okay.
Yes, and racism. I don't want to pick on you, but I don't want you to feel excluded. You want to add anything, or if you're just listening, that's fine too.
No, actually, I was just listening to everyone else's opinions on this because I haven't heard them before. I do have very specific opinions about this whole award thing. First of all, I don't have any problems with using something different than the Lovecraft statue. And the reason why is because I feel, and I've expressed this before, is that I feel like whereas maybe 40 years ago fantasy and horror were more closely aligned, I think nowadays fantasy is considered to be something quite separate and different from horror. Lovecraft has come to symbolize a very specific kind of horror that I think the World Fantasy Organization perhaps doesn't see itself representing anymore. Fantasy is many different things, but I think that Lovecraft is so specific that the people who might want to be nominated for the award, or writers who win the award, feel that Lovecraft himself and the fiction that he wrote doesn't really represent their fantasy or the type of fantasy that's being written or that's popular nowadays. So I see this in part as a kind of a further separation of fantasy and horror. Lovecraft is very much horror nowadays, and world fantasy is something very different. Fantasy in general is something different. So, you know, people may say, and I believe this is valid, that when people say Lovecraft is racist, and it embarrasses me and humiliates me and degrades me as a human, you know, to be associated with him, I don't think that those are invalid feelings, and I think that the World Fantasy Organization should absolutely act on you know, that portion of people who are saying, you know, this hurts me and this hurts us. But I think there's something different going on, and it's this whole view of fantasy versus horror. And I think that Lovecraft really is no longer a representative of what world fantasy is. You know, fairy tales and steampunk, and I'm not saying it's all sunshine and puppies or it's all light or whatever, but there's this cultural shift that's happened over the past couple of decades, and I think that Lovecraft is not lower than fantasy, although some people might think he is, and I know many people do think, you know, science fiction and fantasy, they're up here, and horror is below the screen. But I think there's just been this further separation, even as he's become more popular in culture in general. For writers, he's become something quite separate, and so when I first heard about this, I was a little bit offended, and I thought, oh, you know, why don't they love horror writers? Why don't they love us? You know, why do we always have to be separate? But this really isn't about me, and it's not, you know, it's about the people who go to this convention and who get nominated for this award, and quite frankly, that's never going to be me. And so, you know, I just need to, like, let go of that. There are people who are going to always say, Lovecraft is a racist, and his ideas were racist, and if you as a writer take inspiration from those ideas, then, you know, maybe you should look to your own racist ideas and your racism, and your white privilege, you know, and I don't think they're wrong, but, you know, every day I do the best I can, and I try not to be racist, and I don't believe my fiction is racist, and I will always take Lovecraft's ideas and you know, always be inspired by them, and there are always going to be people who are, you know, absolutely judgmental of that, and in that respect I've failed them, and I accept that, you know, but that has nothing to do, my feelings and who you know, how I feel and how hurt I am or may be and how racist I may be has nothing to do with the World Fantasy Award. That's for a different group of people, and, you know, they can do whatever they want, and I'm going to keep writing the kind of fiction I want, and it will unfortunately continue to probably be further separated from, you know, science fiction and fantasy writers, but, you know, we all do what we do, and I write horror. I write hardcore horror, and a lot of it is Lovecraftian, and, you know, and so here I am over here, and I'll be with Lovecraft, and, you know, and that's fine. That's fine. I think that's about it. I think that's all I have.
There's a lot of people, Olivia, that truly feel if you take inspiration, if a writer takes inspiration from Lovecraft, then, gee, you know, maybe you're racist. Do you think a lot of people feel that way?
I don't know. You know, I have not seen anyone say that online. Of course, I'm not on Facebook, and I'm not on a lot of forums, and so I haven't seen a lot of the really hardcore fighting over the award. Mm-hmm. I think that as a white person, I had a very specific reaction to to, you know, the whole Lovecraft is racist, and I had to think about that, and I do think about that. I don't believe that I'm racist, but you want to know something that's really not for me to say. I believe it's for people of color to say. You know,
Right.
if they believe my fiction is hurting them and absolutely oppressing them, and you know, then I need to do something about that. At this time, no one has said that to me. Absolutely no one, and I have not seen anything like that online. But it was
And I haven't seen.
I won't lie. I thought about it.
Well, you know, for me, I'm really not quote unquote into Lovecraft. I'm into the themes of Lovecraftian
Yeah.
horror. You know, I'm a big fan of stories, you know, that feature cosmic horror and similar themes.
Yeah.
That's what I like to read. That's what I like to publish in my magazine. Certainly, I do publish some pastiche stories, and I say that in a good way. There's some very good pastiche out there. But you know, at least 3/4 of it is, you know, never mentions Innsmouth or Lovecraft, you
Yeah,
know,
no, it's all very
anything like
vague
that.
cosmic horror, and
Yeah.
I do prefer that actually, and that's kind of more of what I touch on in my writing. But you know, again, it's sometimes the things you do affect people in ways that you can't possibly conceive of, and a lot of it, you know, is. I've been riding a wave of white privilege since I was born, and I will ride it until I die. And there's absolutely, you know, so no matter how much I may feel about something or may feel that I'm doing something good, there's always the possibility of someone coming up to me and saying, no, you know, you have to look at it from my point of view. This is not good. You know, this is hurtful and whatever. And you know, and I think in the case of the award, it is, you know, and I genuinely believe that, and I believe that there are really great writers out there who are really horrified by it, even if they had never heard of, you know, Lovecraft's racism before, and I think it has to be taken into account. I think it has to mean something, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, this woman this woman was absolutely ecstatic to have won the award and had no clue that it bothered. That's one of the things that bothered me is you win this thing, you're happy, great. I understand that. That's all. It, you know, you don't think it'll happen. You're sweating it. You're excited. You're scared, and then ultimately you win it, and it's like wow. And that's a great feeling. And then to discover what was this thing behind it. What a horrible thing for that poor woman.
And I don't think that can happen to anyone, and that's why I think that, and I think that now enough people know or feel that Lovecraft doesn't speak to them, that it should be changed. Into what, I don't know. If people want to go with Octavia Butler, again, that's, you know, I'm not really a world fantasy person, and I'm probably never going to be nominated, so, you know, whatever the committee and whatever people feel best speaks to them is fine. You know, it's not taking, I think what I had to realize is that it's not taking anything away from me as a horror writer and as a lover of Lovecraft to have people say, yeah, fuck him. You know, he's disgusting. We don't want him to be a part of what we do. That's fine. He's a part of what I do. So.
Olivia, I want to.
And I have a question for everybody. I could be wrong here, but there seems to be, everybody is bitching because, oh, we're going to change this award that's been the award for 40 years.
I could care less what they do.
Well, I could, yeah, whatever they decide is fine. Livia's 110% right about that. I'm under the impression there are other major awards that in the past were changed. Am I wrong on that? I think a couple of these big things were changed from A to B in the past already. this would not be a precedent. This
Well,
wouldn't
if
be the
anybody here
first.
knows, it'd be Rick and Pete.
I don't know of any.
I mean, the Hugo Award is a spaceship now. Is that it, right?
Yes, but the pedestal changes every year to reflect the location of
Oh, okay. I mean, because I thought something changed.
yeah, it's the pedestal and the design of it. Yeah.
Pete, were you going to say something a minute ago?
The spaceship changes. I'm sorry, what was that?
What, were you going to say something a minute ago?
Well,
Go ahead.
I just wanted to expand on what Livia was saying, because Livia touched on something that has been a problem in the genre, science fiction, fantasy, and horror for a long time. And Larry Niven talks about it in his essay where he calls science fiction, fantasy, and horror a ghetto. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
The SFF&H back in the day was all lumped into one thing because it had a very limited focus and there were limited fan base, so it was all together. Robert Bloch wins the first World Fantasy Award for Lifetime Achievement, but he's a horror writer. Patricia McKillop wins the award for The Forgotten Beasts of Elves. She's a fantasy at the same time. So it's a huge dichotomy. Now I think that she's hitting on something that's very core to the problem, and maybe tangential to the problem that we're talking about here, is that horror is being kicked out of the ghetto and told to go form their own ghetto. Science fiction and fantasy have become very mainstream. There's a lot of television now. Horror is still pushing the boundaries. Yes, you have American Horror Story and a few other things, but it's sort of still pushed off to the side, and we don't want to acknowledge that. What do you guys think?
Yeah,
You
no,
know-
I think that science fiction has become an acceptable form of writing. I think fantasy has become acceptable. I think horror is still considered the bastard child. Now, in part, perhaps that's due to film. I mean, with the advent of slasher film, we stepped away from what I would call atmospheric horror, and slasher and gore stuff became the new world order, and I think horror literature suffers from film. There's this perception that's what horror is. There is. If we take T.E.D. Klein or we take Livia, they're stuck under that umbrella with Freddy Krueger and shit.
Well,
you know what I'm saying?
No, but you're right, because you know what? It's disgust and fear elicit the same sort of physical and emotional responses, and it's
right, but they're not the same thing.
It's hard to do fear. It's easy to go for the gross out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's not what horror fiction is all about. There are authors who really do that well, and I have some of them in my collection. But there are other authors.
Great if that's what you do.
That's right.
Because we should all. Our job as a writer is to be ourselves as much as humanly possible, to impart as much as we possibly can. So, I mean, if you take you, Pete, if you take Livia, if you take me, we're three completely different beasts on the page. We perceive the page differently. We have different objectives. One of us we'll take Livia off the table because she's too brilliant to talk about here.
But
I think you and I, Pete, with what we do a pretty good job.
I hope so.
I do too. I hope so. Um, but Livia's right. There is this cultural shift in what's considered fantasy, perhaps, and it is separating itself from horror.
I remember years ago, I was a member of my local science fiction club, and they were looking for a movie to go see, um, as a group. And I remember, I think George Romero's new Dawn, one of his Dead movies was out, and I said, "Let's go see that." And they said, "Oh, not another zombie movie." And I'm like, "Oh, not another stupid Star Trek, Star Wars movie."
Mm-hmm.
It's the same reaction, just
You
And,
just like seeing people eat one another.
well, no, I think George Romero does a good job of using zombies as a metaphor for something else.
All right.
And I think when we knew less, all right, when Joe Pulver knew less, when Joe Pulver was 11, 12, 15, 18, 19, 22, and he was reading science fiction, and he was reading fantasy, and he was reading horror. Joe Pulver put them all under this umbrella of, we'll call it the fantastic. I could read a science fiction story that had fantasy elements, and it was horrific. You could read a fantasy story that was dark and wound up to be a horror story. I saw them as close cousins.
Mm.
I think, in part because of marketing, that as we've moved forward from, I'll say 1970 or so, just to pick a date back when Joe Pulver was a young idiot as opposed to an old one.
You say 1870?
Yeah, 1870 exactly. Yeah. I think we've started to divide and separate. I think a
Labels
lot of,
can be useful, but they can be limiting as well.
yeah, I understand the importance. When Joe Pulver was like 10 years old and he would go into the local library on Brandywine Avenue and he wanted a new science fiction book and would bug the librarians, I could understand why they'd want to have a little science fiction section. Made perfect sense. And, to Joe Pulver, that was a great thing because I could walk over there and go, wow, look at how many there are.
Mm-hmm.
But it also hurts, too, because all of a sudden, something that's just a piece of literature all of a sudden has a name. And it's not literature anymore. It's now science fiction. Or it's now fantasy. So it's a helpful, finger post, but it also hurts.
Yeah. Well, I just can't help. I live my life asking myself if what I do or say, is this going to hurt somebody? And to the best of my ability, try not to do that. Nobody's perfect, and I certainly am not. But I forget which, it was a writer that said that the only real sin is hurting other people unnecessarily. I think that's a good rule. So, do I think it's Lovecraft's racism is worthy of discussion? Yeah. It seems pretty obvious that he was a racist, but I can't, at the same time, help but feeling that a lot of people are getting worked up over this award, or overly worked up.
Yeah.
I've been through a lot
and I don't.
in my life, and folks, this is not that big of a thing. I've seen,
Well, I think it's not that big of a thing for people who love Lovecraft or who write horror or who want to win an award and have Lovecraft be the representative of that award. I think, unfortunately, however, there are many people who would feel really hurt and slighted by the image of Lovecraft as an award. So
no, I'm not talking about those people. You know, in fact, I totally agree with what you're saying. If that's gonna hurt somebody, then and it seems like it obviously is, then I'm all for changing it if it was my decision to make. Which is not. You know, I don't want anyone. I don't want anyone to be hurt. I don't want anyone to feel badly. To the best of our ability, I want to make sure that we don't do that. You know.
Call it the world's. I'm sorry, Livia.
No, that's okay. I was just. It seems like awards and things are shrinking and things are getting worse. This is a world in which things seem to be getting better. And it would be wonderful, however, if instead of just taking that award or that statue and confining it to history, you know, if there could be an organization who could pick it up and say, well, we'll use this as the symbol for best Lovecraftian novel or whatever. It doesn't have to be lost. You know, there's
a great point.
That image and that statue has a lot of meaning and emotional weight, and for people of color and white people and for anyone who loves Lovecraft and who loves the fiction and all of his worlds, but just not for World Fantasy, for some other award, for some other organization.
I can see how it got started.
None.
As Matt was saying, I can see how it all got started, but you know,
the obvious thing for that would be to have a juried committee at the Necronomicon.
Yep.
Yeah.
You like give out like the best novel, the best short story,
the best
best visual art.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah. Or just something for their guest of honor. Instead of having going for all the juries or whatever, just have it be something that is given to someone who's made significant Lovecraftian contributions.
But they already did that. They already have the Starry Wisdom Award.
Yeah, Matt explained to us at the start of the show how this got started with the World Fantasy Award, with Lovecraft being the image representing that award. And I can understand how it got started, but I don't think that Lovecraft is representative of fantasy today, and I don't, even if the whole racism thing wasn't an issue, someone else is probably appropriate, or something else. Chimera, a flying dragon, or something.
Someone on Twitter mentioned Scheherazade. I don't know. I thought it was kind of an interesting, a woman who tells thousands and thousands of fantastical stories.
Which would be great, and I would love that. But I'll bet you that the minute we make it Scheherazade, which would be cool, we're going to get some assbag who is one of the card-carrying members of this fucking war against women and go, oh, it's a woman, I'm a guy, that offends me,
No, you're going to...
Actually, you're going to get pushed back because she's an Islamic character.
Then it should just be a statue of Twin Peaks.
All right, why we can't just have a creature? We'll go back to Mamatas's idea of...
That's fine. Yeah, I don't care. I'm not emotionally invested at all. It was just a suggestion.
Well, no, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could do something. Look, we got to do something that's fantasy, a flying dragon, or let's say weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Something that's not true.
Make it a creature if you're gonna, and call it the World Fantasy Award.
The World Fantasy. How about a nice house with no rent and lots of hot water?
There you go.
And a
it looks like the World Fantasy Award looks like a lotto ticket.
Actually, you could, if you did the World Fantasy, and I'm spitballing here, if you did the World Fantasy as a dragon, Well, dragons are almost universal. Whatever host country is hosting could redesign it as a
Yeah.
local dragon. The British
Make
versus the
it-
Chinese,
Make
that'd be
the
fun.
award look like an open book. On this half,
There you go.
it says World Fantasy Award. On that page, it says presented to Livia Llewellyn for short story, blah, blah, blah. We write. We contribute to books. Make it a goddamn book.
Yeah, that's true.
Great idea.
Yeah.
You know? It,
Oh, there was the other, and Gillian Wilson talks about this. There is another factor in the award.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be this. It has to be grippable and vertical. Because when they're taking their pictures, they want to be able to clutch it, but not block out. I mean, this is actually.
Well, that's kind of phallic.
You mean you have to hold it with one hand? Is that what you're saying? You have to be
You
able
have
to
to
hold
hold
it
it
with
with
one hand.
phallic, and it can't take up a lot of space.
okay, so
That's pretty
an
phallic.
open book. This is here it is. Yes, Joe Pulver was privileged and lucky to win a Shirley Jackson Award.
You just want to show off the
Thanks.
Shirley Jackson Award.
That's right. Thanks to contributors like Livia Llewellyn, okay? I could hold this award up this way if it was an open book. It wouldn't be too big. It could be like right here. You could have, you
Yeah,
know,
it could be done.
this
It could be
here
done.
and that there. It would work beautifully. You know, there's a lot of easy ways around this if this committee decides they want to change this award. And there's nothing wrong with changing the award because it has offended some people deeply.
I agree.
I can live with that.
Yeah.
I can too. And
But-
if the diehard fans of Lovecraft aren't happy that the award is being, if they're considering changing the award, say what you want to say. But
Yeah,
how
absolutely.
about being polite? Do not descend into that guy's nothing. You know, he didn't research this. You know, he didn't read this. He doesn't know that. He didn't read page 62 of the letters and see in paragraph 4, blah 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 blah. Okay, if you want to call them out and you want to cite chapter and verse in that kind of depth, fine. Do it without calling him a fucking asshole.
Yeah. You know, a lot of
Because
these
he has a
conversations
different
seem to
opinion.
collapse into fuck you, no, fuck you, and
Yeah,
on from there.
But then-
it's turned into an internet flame war thing.
But my point
And
would
we
be
don't
that
need that. That does.
Yeah, Pete?
if you want to do this, if you're going to put a petition together to change the World Fantasy Award because it offends you, then you should be looking at all the other ones as well. Because I think you'll find that they're all.
I guess, Pete, the thing is about this is currently Lovecraft's name has a certain amount of cachet. You know, it is riding the crest of increasing popularity.
That's what it's got.
With Del Toro talking about it, with about doing the Mountains of Madness, with all these plushy Cthulhu's.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason that they're bringing up the thing about Lovecraft so vociferously is simply because it's in the public eye.
Right.
All this other stuff that you talk about
It
is
is rendering toxic of one of the most important figures in horror. That is my problem with it. Especially when he's becoming very popular. You know, I'm sorry, there's a reason that Salon and the rest of the indignation mob have chosen this. It's because they want to render somebody toxic. They smell blood in the water, and that's what they want.
And I would agree with you completely. And Matt, the issue that I have is that, okay, it's not the big things that where racism dwells. It's often in the little things.
Yeah.
And if you're going to go after the big ones, you have to go after the little ones.
Yeah, and that's my point too. You know, Danielle and I were walking the dog the other night, a few weeks ago, actually. We are about a block away, and it's about midnight. And this guy drives up. He's a business owner. He owns a business that was right by where we were walking, and he gets out and asks us if, hey, do you guys see a black guy around here? I'm like, what? And, do you see a black guy? Our place just got broken into. And I'm like, any particular black guy? Will any of them do? And he didn't think that was funny at all. But I see that so much, and it's ridiculous. It's how we treat each other today. Yeah, it's valid talking about Lovecraft's views 75 years ago, but there's too much of it going on right now. That needs to change. So.
I can live with changing the award if all of them are examined and given the same kind of scrutiny.
Yeah. So what you're saying is just to do it to one award is hypocritical.
Do you know that Far Side cartoon where there's that little kid sitting in a class and he's got a tiny head and he says, "Excuse me, can I be excused because my brain is full?"
Yeah.
That's where I'm at the point with this discussion. I have nothing left to say. Most of what's said just kind of rolls off me anymore. I don't deny people the right to discuss what they want or the importance of it. I just don't see it changing my reading views or what entertains me very much or what I consider to be Lovecraft's importance. So
when people bring it up, my reaction is always I think, yeah, you're right. He was a racist. Okay, so now what? I mean, what do you want me to say? I mean, what is there to talk about?
That's the other. Yeah, he's a racist. Okay, lots of people have flaws and faults, and he was a human being. He had crappy views on race. And let's just not say this. It wasn't just on African Americans or Asians. I read this. I reread a lot of the stories lately, and from what I can tell, he hated the Dutch too. There's 3 stories I think where the Dutch become problematic.
Yeah, he was scared to death of anything different.
So
he was a xenophobe, and,
yeah.
and the thing is, he didn't like poor white people, and he was a poor white person, and he didn't like everyone he ran into when he lived in New York.
Oh yeah, he hated New Yorkers, all colors, all of us. Yeah.
Yeah, he was universally, you didn't like people, and he
was Archie Bunker.
In his heart for people of other skin colors.
He was Archie Bunker.
Well, to be honest,
he was Archie Bunker of his day.
Actually, that comparison.
He didn't like the Italians. He didn't like Jews. Unless you were a WASP, forget it.
A WASP of a certain class as well, and a certain bearing.
Yeah.
As a resident of Palm Beach County, I hate New Yorkers too.
So I think where we are with this, without beating a dead horse too much, is that it's the World Fantasy Award. Whoever's in charge of that, it's their decision. Obviously, it goes without saying with what they want to do. If it was my decision, or my reaction is, I don't care. Whatever they want to do is fine, and certainly let's err on the side of not making anyone feel badly, not making people feel hurt. And if people are feeling hurt that have won this award, then maybe this bears looking into. I also take Pete's point about a lot of these awards probably bear looking into. He made some really good points there, Pete. As far as I'm concerned, I don't know what else to say when people bring this up. As I said a minute ago, I'm not going to argue with anyone that says he's a racist, because I know that he was. But at that point, I mean, what else do you want me to say? So anyone else want to say anything in closing on all that?
No, but the other thing is, I'd like to. You have to understand, if you're listening out there, we don't begrudge anybody their right to want to talk about it or raise their own voice.
Right.
It's just, I don't know if I have anything left to contribute to the discussion. It's like, but I'm not going to certainly say you're wrong to keep bringing it up, or it's not an unimportant thing, you know.
You know, especially those that are new to Lovecraft are probably going to discuss it more than someone who's been reading him for 20 years. You know,
Okay,
or
that's
longer.
fine. There's
You know?
people out there who haven't encountered the issue and they're interested. It's a new fact, a new facet of something Lovecraftian to them. They're interested.
Mhm.
That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. To those of us who've been doing this for more decades than we can count, you know, there's also people out there who are only interested in, I'll call it a light reading of the material. You know, they don't want to read all the letters. They don't want to read 24 volumes of criticism. You know, they do not care, you know, what shoe size Lovecraft had.
Yeah,
You
I'll put
know?
myself in that category. I'm interested in the stories, you know,
Yeah.
and the themes.
The only other thing
Yeah,
I might
Pete.
want to say on this issue is that if you're a writer or a reader and you don't like the fact that Lovecraft was a racist, one, don't read him. Don't buy it.
Hmm.
Two, don't write it. If it offends you that badly, don't write Lovecraftian stories. It really bothers me because some of the people who have been most vocal about this are publishing Lovecraftian fiction or editing Lovecraftian fiction. You can't have it both ways. Yes,
Yeah.
acknowledge he was a racist and say, but despite that, I like the work. Because the writer is not always the stories, and the stories aren't always the writer. And that's something that has to be said on this conversation.
Forgive me for being out of the know here, but we had and I probably came to this woefully unprepared. But there are Lovecraftian writers out there who are jumping on this bandwagon.
Yeah.
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 All right then, didn't know that.
Yeah. You know, and it's shocking to me, absolutely shocking. Fine.
Can I ask another uninformed question as well? How did Lovecraft's head get on that award in the first place?
Okay, so what you missed at the beginning of the story was that the committee that was set up to pick what the award was going to be sat around and they couldn't come up with a decision. So Gahan Wilson, who's on the committee, says, hey, what if we do H.P. Lovecraft? And since the World Fantasy World in 1975 is being held in Providence, that sounds like a great idea. Plus, everybody on the panel and everybody organizing are big Lovecraftian fans. Okay, so they say, yeah, let's do Lovecraft. And then Gahan Wilson says, well, I'm an artist. Why don't you let me design it and sculpt it? And they say, yeah, sure, why not? Because we're, a committee of 10 people and we don't have any money. So yeah, sure, if you're volunteering to do that, go ahead. And here we are 40 some odd years later.
You know, Daniel Older wants to change it he cites two reasons: the racism factor and, to paraphrase him, besides Lovecraft was just a crappy writer. I'd like to talk about that just for a minute. I mean, was Lovecraft a crappy writer? That's a matter of opinion. I just can't stand it when people throw out their opinions as as fact, So.
I think it's become part of the pulp culture of Lovecraft, especially among people who don't really read him, to just kind of automatically say he was a shit writer. And purple prose, it's always purple prose, and too much description and tentacles, and it's part of what's become kind of the myth, and the popular culture that surrounds him nowadays. it's kind of part and parcel with all of the, people just throwing tentacles everywhere and saying it's Lovecraft.
Right.
And without really needing to or feeling the need to read his fiction from any kind of perspective, just saying, oh no, he was shit.
Okay, I got a question on the message
I don't give a
board.
shit about people who say that. I don't really care. Whatever.
So,
Everyone has an opinion about writing.
also, every writer's going to have, his early work is going to be vastly inferior to his later work.
I'm
like
sorry.
Herbert West Reanimator is not up to shadow of time.
Oh man, now you're gonna get in trouble with Pete now.
No. Nobody's going to get in trouble with me. We're having a discourse.
Yeah,
Herbert,
exactly.
Look, let's be clear about Reanimators. Reanimators was not my title. Okay? If you've read Reanimators, you know that Herbert West doesn't actually appear that much in the story. The fact that I'm using that as a MacGuffin, a red herring, to move through 25 years of living in Arkham, doesn't mean that I love.
No, I'm just giving you a hard time. It's a
I
good
know,
book.
I know.
So it's also, if I can still enjoy Herbert West, but I'll admit it's a crappy story.
Yeah. Yeah,
I've
but
got a question on the message board from a viewer. She says, Andrea, she says, what about Orson Scott Card's homophobia? Is anyone boycotting his work?
oh Christ. I was trying to avoid this one, and I saw that comment earlier.
Yeah.
It's a good parallel, because there are authors out there who are, not the nicest people. Orson Scott Card is great. It bothers me. I got the Centipede Press newsletter today. The books they're touting this week are the Centipede Press edition of Ender's Game and Caitlin Kernan's The Drowning Girl. Trying to figure out how you put those two books in your catalog.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know how you do it. Don't even. You put it down. Dollars. They both sell.
Yeah.
That's how they get in the catalog.
Right.
No one's trying to make a statement there except to say, "Gosh, I'm going to be able to put food on the table next month."
Yep.
There are even writers out there who are Republicans, believe it or not.
Oh, yeah.
God.
Wow.
Yeah.
What
And the written word in that case.
You know that there are Lovecraftians who are the Republicans?
No way. Say it.
Yeah.
Wait, Mike Davis, do you know that there are Lovecraftian writers that you've published? That
Oh,
are
absolutely. Yeah,
Well, didn't we all just a half an hour ago or 45 minutes ago say that writers are individuals?
Absolutely.
So,
We all say.
they're tall, they're short, they wear glasses, they're blonde, they're bald, they're men, they're women, they're black, they're Hispanic, they vote Democratic, they don't like pickles, pick something. It's why we read them.
Yeah, that's right. And we need to. More people need to learn to be able to have a civil discourse with those that they disagree with, or they don't see eye to eye with.
And
Brett
the other
Hale
thing
is
is,
a good example. Well, I mean, what a great guy he is, and a really good writer. He's written one of my favorite Lovecraftian books, That Which Should Not Be. But we don't see eye to eye on a lot of political things. But who cares?
Yeah, absolutely.
the thing is as a writer, we all try to put our all into the work, and occasionally we're self-referential. We might actually incorporate a specific event that actually took place in our life.
Or a specific philosophy.
Yeah, but You know, we also write about people that bear no resemblance to us whatsoever. And these people can be prejudiced. These people can be antisocial. They can be we write about psychopaths. Now, you know, I may suffer from one mental disorder or another, but I don't think I've approached psychopath. Well, not
That's
this.
why you're not allowed back in the country except under supervision.
Well, that's true. That's true. You know, the Brits. You should see what happens when I try to get through Heathrow.
I have.
Whatever. What is it? MI6 in England? Their file on me there is thicker than your FBI file.
The terrorist pulver again.
Oh, they do not like me. I don't know.
Well, I appreciate you guys discussing this with me today. Appreciate everybody that watched. Appreciate being able to talk about such a volatile topic, and you know, in a civil manner. So,
Something nice now.
pardon me.
Talk about something else now.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say too. I don't want to beat this thing to death. I think it was worth talking about, but you know, there are things worth talking about too. So.
Can I just something if we're segueing? Hey Joe, I finally got a copy of Blood Will Have Its season for Kindle because I sometimes will take my phone app and read during lunch when I'm at work because I don't have any friends to sit with, but that's another story. Anyway, I started reading your book, and I gotta say, 2 of your stories literally made my flesh crawl. One was the title story for the collection.
Okay.
And the other was that story about that guy who escaped from the asylum and was going around the country sending messages to Dr. Archer.
Yeah, you gotta be more specific than that.
Oh my goodness, this is really powerful stuff. I gotta say, that's just stuck with me all weekend. It's really good stuff.
One thing, can I tell you something? When you're reading that book, read the stories in order.
I'm doing it.
Okay, only because if you liked Carl Lee, it's part of a trilogy.
Oh crap, Joe! I forgot to tell you. Shoot.
You rearranged them?
When I published it for Kindle, I did a different story order. Is that okay? I should have.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. But the thing is I didn't want the 3. I did for some stupid reason. I didn't want the 3 stories together. What I wanted was somebody to read it and think, "Oh, that's the story," and then read like 9 more stories, and then get slapped when Carl Lee returns. So you're not done with him yet.
No, I know. I got about. I'm halfway through.
So, well, he's
that's
gonna
that's a
make
great
more
book.
appearances. And I'll be honest, Matt. And this is I probably should be embarrassed, but I'm really not. And thank you. I write these things, and then I move on to the next one and forget them. I have no idea what the title story was about. It's been so long I don't remember it.
It was about that guy. He got I think it was Camilla's daughter in a brothel.
Okay, all right, okay, yeah, all right. So you can't tell me the title. I don't remember the titles.
The plot.
Most of the time I'm working on a story. It'll say Nyarlathotep thing #2, and then only at the very end do I put a title on it, or it'll say I don't know, Jim Morrison, Paris Journal, you know, and then someplace I'll decide, oh, that's what it's called. So by title, I almost never remember them.
But yeah, everyone watching, go to Amazon or go to the Lovecraft e-zine and click on e-zine books. But Blood Will Have Its Season is now available for Kindle, but you can buy it print for print or for Kindle. It's a incredible book.
Thank you. And yes,
Yes.
it's a Lovecraft e-zine Kindle book. So Mike
Speaking
Davis's
of,
wife will thank you. Joe Polver, the writer, will thank you because you'll get a royalty.
that's right.
7-Eleven, baby needs new shoes.
Other books coming up this week and/or recent books. The Sea of Ash is almost done, and it could very well be published this week, which is Scott Thomas's novella, which I think is incredible, and that's why I'm publishing it. I talked about Bill's book before he came on the show. It was published, I think, last week. Title just went out of my brain. What is it again, Bill?
Lonely Girl?
Sorry?
Lucky's Girl.
Lucky's Girl, right. Very good Lovecraftian novel. And then Pete's book, The Weird Company, is coming out on Tuesday. So.
And just out is the inaugural volume of the year's best weird fiction that was edited by Laird Barron. And I have something in there, which was actually published in Lovecraft e-zine. And Livia has something in there, which was actually published in the Grimscribe's Puppets that I won the Shirley Jackson Award for.
Which you won because you published my story.
And her story was also nominated for a Shirley Jackson Award. And Scott Nickley, who had a story in the Grimscribe's Puppets, I Exchange Bank, his story is also in the year's best weird fiction. So that's just out. Laird was the editor, and every year they're going to change editors. So Volume 2 will be edited by Kathy Koja.
Oh, okay. That's good.
I think the idea of weird fiction having a yearly best of is a great idea. I love the idea of rotating editors. You know, I think this is going to be a great series, and the publisher Mike Kelly of Undertow Books. I think this is a really cool thing. Hope it sells a ton. It's got John Langan in it. It's got Willem Pugmire in it. It's got Simon Stranzis in it. I think Jeffrey Ford and Jeff Vandermeer are in it. Our buddy Jeff Thomas is in it. It's a phenomenal table of contents. And that's one thing that I really like lately. We are seeing so many anthologies come out, and you look at these table of contents, you know, and you see Laird's there, and Stranzis is there, and Livia's there. This is just, you know, we're living in a good time.
Well,
or maybe we'll let Matt Carpenter talk about that because he buys every one of these.
Let me throw something out there because I'm doing this to review, and I'm about halfway done, and I'm thrilled with it. The author is Mike Allen. The book is Unseeming.
Unseeming, you got it.
You got it?
What kind of, is it a novel or short stories?
It's a collection of short stories.
Okay. What kind of short stories?
Yeah,
he sent me the arc a while ago.
I'm loving this book.
Yeah.
Weird fiction, Lovecraftian fiction? What is
There's a few pieces of Lovecraftian fiction in here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm only about halfway through. but I've read some of these stories before. The one that Her Acres of Pastoral Playground originally appeared in Cthulhu's Reign by Daryl Schweitzer. This is a very strong debut collection, probably on par with Scott Nicolay's.
Oh, you know, this year we have Simon Strands' collection, we have Nicolay's collection, we have Mike Allen's, we have Daniel Mills. This is a hell of a year for collections.
Yeah.
I mean, when it comes time for nominations and voting next year, I'm glad I'm not voting on these things, because this is shaping up to be a hell of a year.
I tell you, I get a lot of these proofs, and most of them I toss after I read and write them. This one I'm keeping.
Is a keeper, yeah.
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 This one's a keeper.
Yep.
Last but not least,
blew my mind.
Last but not least, Elizabeth Bear is my author of the week, which I'm now doing every Sunday. So check out that post at Lovecraft Easy and check out her stuff. She's actually got 3 or 4 Lovecraftian stories free to read online. So, and I've linked to those.
May I just say
Shawgoss
and Bloom? Shawgoss and Bloom on the Hugo.
Yeah.
Yeah, Shawgoss and Bloom is an excellent. Blujums is the other one that comes to mind. Elizabeth Bear is just a really great Lovecraftian writer. She's a great writer, period.
Great writer, period.
But she delves into the Lovecraftian stuff every once in a while, and they're just stunning reimaginations of the genre.
Hey, can I? The other thing, going back to our discussion of Lovecraft and racism, Shawgoss and Bloom, I think it was 2009, wasn't it? Something like that, 2010. It is a meditation on the topic.
Yes.
It's really quite good. It's considering it's free online. What's stopping you?
Yeah, I linked to that, and there's at least 2 or 3 others that, going from memory, that I linked to that you can start off and you can read for free online, and then buy her books too. But
there's somebody who would be great if you could get her on, Mike.
Yeah, that's a good point.
The funny thing is, I think she lives part of the year in Massachusetts, and I have suggested that Necronomicon bring her in. The timing's not right, ever.
2 weeks from now, I believe it is, Stephen Mark Rainey's going to talk with us. So I had a great time talking with him last time he was on the show. He's a really great guy.
Yeah, he's a hoot.
Fun to talk to, So anyway, thanks guys for being on the show. Good to see you, Bill, too. Thanks everybody for watching, and I'll see everybody next Sunday, hopefully.
Thanks, Mike.
Have a good weekend, guys, or what's left of it. Talk to you soon.